Hi, welcome to the Indie Wine Podcast. My name is Matt Wood, and this is episode 66. Today we're hearing from Greg and Rose Nemet from Kareen Wines. They've been making wine professionally since 2016, working mostly with Lodi and Clarksburg fruit, and more recently from their estate vineyard in the Shenandoah Valley. We talk some about how their Armenian heritage has inspired their winemaking, working in Lodi, and some new varieties for their estate vineyard. Here we go.
Sell. It's like it's the worst kind of like combo for winemakers. Is like you go off of a harvest, things are still actually fermenting.
They're really
like,
we haven't pressed our last
our last
pick,
and now you gotta like run into the market like wah! It's like,
Yeah, I mean, I think it seems like your Armenian heritage is very important to you. I saw your stand a couple weeks ago at the Armenian Food Festival. Mm-hmm. I think we were there maybe right before you started pouring.
Right.
Yes.
But I saw your stand, so I was like, oh, and then I recognized the
label,
symbol and the label and everything from your sign. But what's your Armenian heritage, and I guess how that combines with winemaking and bigger things in life mean to you guys?
Yeah, like Rose, like I can take a dive into this. So coming into California, right? We spoke a little bit that we have that little high school overlap. Matt and I realized we graduated from the same high school. What is it? Falcons? Go Falcons!
Yep, go Falcons.
I forgot. Yeah, the first time I said that in 20 years. And being in California, like there's a big love affair with this state. And one of the things that this state does so well is food, hospitality, and winemaking. So being Armenian definitely speaks to that cultural aspect. A lot of people ask, oh, hey, are you like generations into winemaking? No, as it pertains to our family, some great-grandfather actually was into beekeeping back in the day, like in the old country. But this is where the winemaking story starts
for our family.
However, culturally, Armenia just carbon dated 6,100-year-old wine cave in an area called Areni. So we wanted to be part of that cultural heritage, although in the diaspora. So we kind of carry that duality, like love California. You have a Chenin Blanc in front of you, which is from Clarksburg. It's not from Armenia. Yeah. But the brand, we want it to be like, I walk around this earth and I see there's a lot of homage to cultural backgrounds up and down Napa, from the Italians that brought everything to Sonoma to a lot of French interconnectivity with Napa.
Yeah, also a lot of Mexican vineyard presence, this talent that a lot of Mexican families have instilled within the California viticultural landscape.
Absolutely.
And they're now also making wine. So everyone's kind of bringing their cultural identity into brand. Mm-hmm. And that was really important to us.
Right. Yeah. Well. And even before we formed the brand, like I did a lot of like Napa stints and, Santa Cruz and all up and down to just kind of like get as much into me before we kind of launched. Right. I was at Cliff Lady is a spot in Napa, and they're so proudly Canadian. And I was like, that's it. If our brand comes up, we're going to be Californian, obviously, because this is where we are, but we're also going to rep Armenian, the heritage, and we have so much to say in there because 6,100 years of things. So that's where the origins are. Armenia, why now? Armenia currently is going through a renaissance in winemaking as well. So for hundreds of years being under the Ottoman Empire, going through a lot of travesties and a lot of ethnic cleansing and genocides, we carried on the tradition of winemaking. However, it's got into a little bit of a dormancy, right? And then we got put under this big umbrella of the Soviet Union. Armenia only is independent since the early 90s. So in that time of Soviet Union, obviously, Armenia is like all over the place. There's 400 indigenous grape varieties. However, what Armenia was doing for Soviet Union was doing brandy, cognac. So very famous. A lot of Ararat is a brand that's everywhere. Total Wines. So that kept the viticulture going because that at least vines were growing in the Ararat Valley. But that home small small producer winemaking was almost dead to the point of just, grandmas remembered recipes of how to make wine. Grandpas here and there would just make little batches here and there, and then they would put them in plastic bottles.
Yeah.
Nothing that's really, can go to market.
Sure.
But as of around, I want to say early 2000s, there was this push to kind of go hey man, we got to get back to our roots of viticulture and enology. And Armenia has been hitting the mark hardcore. Every year things are once they realize that they got to go quality, well, first of all, rebuild the industry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Plant more. And as that's happening, my family and I were what, this is awesome. What can we do? How can we be part of that conversation from the diaspora, which we've been part of? So those are the interconnectivities.
Yeah. So you started just kind of messing around kind of with some homemade wine in the garage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
About what, 15 years ago or so?
Yeah. The story you wanna
yeah, no. I mean, so we started we live in East Contra Costa County. So, it was really just by what was available that we got to start experimenting.
Yeah.
And the first couple of vintages, our grandfather, who's a genocide survivor, was involved in that with us. Though my brother reminded me that he was more excited about the pomegranates.
Yeah.
In that vineyard that we sourced from initially.
So the story starts in Contra Costa for us, for Kareen wine, which is a great viticultural area, as you know here, right? Yeah. It's the old wine, Evangelo vineyards and all that. The story didn't. The story didn't start with those vineyards, although now I wish. But nevertheless, we know that there's a lot of good grape growing there. Yeah. But through prohibition, production is not very well possible or good there, because a lot of the producers in Contra Costa still make wine in Livermore and then elsewhere. Whatever that is, I was not trying to get into that story. I don't want to change Martinez's way of governing Contra Costa, but great grapes. So we're sitting on great grapes. We're sitting in close proximity to it. So we got a little connect. It was a vineyard, maybe a half an acre to an acre, not the biggest. Yeah. And then there was also an adjoining pomegranate ranch next to it. Nice. Because Armenians also do a lot of fruit wine, we can go into that later, but fruit wine's a thing, but I'm the wine that I'm interested in is made predominantly from grapes. So, but Armenians do a lot of good stuff with fruit wine. So he was like, oh my God, look at those pomegranates here. As we're doing our first Zinfandel pick. So the first Garagiste batch was a Zinfandel. So that was 2010. Nice. So things just kind of started progressing from there. Rose has her background professionally. I studied photography in college, so I had that going. But the wine bug kind of continued consuming us, and our family being very close knit, and my father especially being from Georgia, wine was he was always he was concerned why Armenians came here, brought yogurt and raisin to this nation, and did not become titans of winemaking, So, but slowly but surely we started to just kind of double up, learn, consult a lot of money, paid lots of money on consultants to just be you know what, there are things we get, there are things I consume book after book after book. Early on, I thought I realized that I don't think I'm gonna go back to school because wine has that ability. Rose is currently still debating whether she will go that route or not, but I knew that through vintage, and again, stakes were low at first, and then we started to just go higher and higher, and now we're in it completely. So that's how we started to build this idea of being winemakers. We are a true garage made American
Garage
story.
ground
Yeah,
story, for
yeah,
sure.
like HP and Apple.
I'll never forget. I think there was one vintage in particular that made us really feel like maybe we can do this.
Okay.
This isn't just, we're really trying to, come sink into our identity and our roots and, pay honor to our ancestors, right? This was about, oh, wow, this Malbec is actually, and it was our 2013.
2013, yeah. So
Malbec.
3 years in, yeah.
3 years in. And I'll never forget it, all four of us in the garage corking that, bottling that wine. About 2 years later,
in 2015.
No, yeah. So that we were doing that in 2015 for the 2013 vintage, and we released to our friends, right?
Yeah.
Just like friends and family, and Grigor and I were very, very involved in community, community organizing. We are absolutely, but just more focused in the wine space.
Yeah.
And there were a few events where people were like, "Bring your wine, bring your wine." We were like, "Yeah, let's give it a try," and the reaction was just overwhelming. And that was sort of the start of where we just decided, okay, this is a very expensive hobby. Let's just double down. Let's go all in.
From that vintage on is when I started to kind of like go like, okay, well, let's see what's happening in the wine industry. Which route do I go to stop doing what I do professionally and start doing professionally, which means money involved, right? And that's where I kind of was like, all right, maybe I need to go into the restaurant world just to see, like, I needed to consume as much as I can, as fast as I can, and learn and kind of acquire mentorship. I understood that the garage phase is good and all, right? But now I need to just like jump into the wine world. And I went the WSET route. Then immediately went the Master Court of Sommelier route as well. And then I realized, you know what? No, I got to start working for wineries. So first job was at Sterling Vineyards in the big giant
on the hill
gondola, beautiful winery with great views. And that was a learning experience. That was an interesting vintage. 2017 was the fire. I was my stint there was ending, and I was still on the chat with the employees. And as I'm rolling down the hill, because I got a connection to work here actually in Rosenblum Cellars. That was my next. And Rosenblum kind of opened me up to Bronco and all the production and series that makes this little boutique wine called $2 Chuck. So that was a beautiful growing experience. But as I'm rolling down the hill from Sterling, I hear like everyone's like, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" I'm like, "What's going on?" And apparently that fire was just going out of control. And that was an interesting time. And then it became a norm.
I think it was just after we launched our commercial winery production, and I immediately was like, risk analysis, like, what do we, okay. But so now this is just a mainstay, and now we have to be very, we always have had to be this like very conscientious. I don't want to change the topic too much here, but we move from like organic farming or growing to biodynamic is just a little bit different, right? And then sustainability, and now there's this movement in regenerative growing practices too, which is something I'm really happy to see in the in viticulture, but is more and more of a requirement now for all of us.
True.
We've had to adapt.
Yeah, true. Because that is so Rose started with the formation of the ethos of what we are. So we're still going through our branding. I have a couple of friends in the marketing world that I'm meeting up with, because now we're like what is it, like 15 years into this and coming up on 8 years commercially as Kareen. We got to get serious. We are serious, but we got to get even more serious on that sales trajectory. However, so while the marketing side is being worked out, there's also the core values. And our core values, Rose hit the nail on the head. We want to be good stewards of the land, and we want to deal with people. Because right now, up until our Barbera purchase, which we'll talk later about our estate, up until then, we've been purchasing from others.
Mm-hmm,
And what we did was, are you a small farmer? Are you a sustainable farmer? I'm not really that. I have a couple of things that I want you to kind of cross. I don't need you to be like if you say like I'm not organically certified, but I practice organically, I'm good with you. You know what I mean? Like that's so that was the value. And reality as a winemakers, good fruit makes good wine. I know it sounds cliche, but like we see the difference. And working out of facilities, we see lots and lots of fruit.
Other practices and all kinds of fruit we see coming
and
in.
Working for large producers such as the guys out of series, let's call it that. I see what goes in. You know what I mean? Like I see what goes in, and I see how important it is to kind of be very forward thinking about where your fruit comes in and who are the stewards of the land that you deal with. So
work with,
work with,
trusting the people, working with good people.
And the way that things are going in the world in general, it just seems like I don't know if we're too late, but we gotta at least keep trying. That's the the pessimist side of me.
Yeah. You kind of launched the brand with Malbec, right? Was that that was one of your wines at launch?
Yeah. That was our first commercial vintage.
Okay.
It was our 2016 Malbec. And I was just going to say, because I think there was we started in 2010 and we were describing sort of the journey, the path, the winding path towards deciding to commit, right, to this project. And our first commercial vintage was the 2016, but the brand actually launched when we bottled that in late 2018.
Sure.
And so really we came to market Q4 2018, Q1 2018.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like the genesis of all of the branding and
I'll speak on the
name.
Yeah, I'll speak on the Malbec side of things. So Malbec, right? You're starting out. This is California. We're from New York. Anytime you go to New York, like some of the old school mom and pop shops, they're like, well, if you're California, why even think about it? It's Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, and Cabernet. Why would you do anything else? Now, you and I know how great California is with all sorts of other varietal diversity and components. So I was like, first of all, okay, well, I'm a small guy. I do want to eventually. I've never of these three. I've made cabs since. I haven't made Chardonnay or Pinot for various reasons. Holding off. I haven't found the right grower yet. So, but Malbec to me just spoke from the time I was at Sterling. I would taste up and down the valley, and to market. California big guys, they never bring a Malbec because there's Argentina and that's a huge, you know what I mean? But when you go into the tasting rooms, they're like, oh, we also have a Malbec. And I'm like,
we had some Malbec on the back of the truck, so we vinified it.
We vinified it. And I know that Malbec goes into these blends a lot, right?
Sure.
But I'm tasting it, I'm like, oh my God, this is a great grape. And let's be honest, we're a small producer, first commercial vintage. We're gonna make a ton and a half of it, right? I'm not exactly going to be a market threat to anybody, and I'm not going to make a statement, but we want it to be interesting. You know what I mean? And that's going to be, on the one hand, we're riding the coattails of Argentina, Cahors, amazing, the land of Côte. The story of Malbec is kind of cool because, for folks that don't know, during the time of Napoleonic, classification, Malbec was the predominant grape in Bordeaux. It then kind of changed up because of phylloxera, and currently right now Bordeaux is adapting to the new era of climate change with introduction of some Spanish grapes. So Bordeaux is evolving. Their blends are what we are known for, and Malbec was a great component of that, less so now. Doesn't mean it's any worse of a grape, no. And this is California. We can grow some good stuff. And that 2013 vintage was a Malbec from a very good organic grape grower in Contra Costa.
Okay.
And just these things just came together, and I was like, you know what? I really like Malbec.
Yeah.
Did we as a family know Malbec? No. it felt like a fitting grape to go with. And since then, Kareen Wine has experimented with everything. We've now grown to like 9 SKUs, right?
Yeah.
9 different wines, but Malbec's been there every vintage,
Okay.
and we're gonna try to continue that. Having now the largest component of our production is Barbera. Is Malbec going to be like the domination of what Kareen is known for? No, but Malbec is always going to be part of our vintage mix.
Yeah. Have you changed up the sources and stuff for Malbec?
Yes. We one of the things that we want to do is we want to kind of we haven't been back to Contra Costa. So the sourcing went from Contra Costa, and then we made that leap to, once we started, producing commercially, we went to a great grower in Lodi, because everything shifted towards Lodi.
Yeah.
And we've been with that producer ever since. And I have this dream of coming back to Contra Costa, coming back to that producer that we bought it from, the 2013 vintage, and then do a side-by-side analysis.
Okay. Yeah.
Outside of that, of course, I would love to snoop around and see what's out there in the Sonoma Napa area, is where I've been tasting the Malbecs back in the day. And maybe have something in that kind of portfolio. So a comparative analysis would be great. But going back to the Contra Costa Malbec is something that's been on my mind, and I want to do it probably in the next few vintages.
Okay.
So have a Lodi, a Contra Costa, maybe a Sonoma or a Napa one as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you're sourcing kind of from Clarksburg also.
Yeah.
Shannon's.
So moving past so a bit about Lodi. Lodi is you've seen what's going on. Lodi of the past. Lodi is the engine of California's viticulture and wine production. It's the kind of it's the Bordeaux. It's the Languedoc of this area. But Lodi is also the place that has some of the oldest vines out there, right?
Yeah.
And it has some of the best wine growing that I've seen.
Farming.
The farming is phenomenal. Moving into Lodi, we were able to we had the safety net of saying, you know what, at the very basis of what we do, we're gonna have good fruit, and that was kind of like an easy combination. And I attribute that to a lot of connections, to a lot of good people that we met in Lodi. Even though we are now, when people go oh, what are you? We're a Sierra Foothill producer now. Why? Because our home is now in Sierra Foothills, and we can talk about that in a bit. But Lodi is going to be forever part of my the origin story of Kareen Wines, because and we're going to be continuing to have relations with Lodi. That being said, Lodi is warmer. It's warmer, but what's around Lodi, and that was when the first white I made was was a Viognier, and that Viognier was sourced from the adjoining areas of Lodi by the Delta.
Okay.
The next region closer sitting in smack in the middle of the Delta is Clarksburg.
Yeah. Funny
thing about Clarksburg is, unlike maybe Livermore or some of the lesser known wine regions, Clarksburg is not and I don't want anybody to kill me now, but I'm sure they are trying to be hey, Clarksburg, but Clarksburg doesn't have that much of a destination pull. It's in the backyard of Sacramento, kind of. There's a cool spot called Sugar Mill that has a lot of very good
like a communal
tasting room. Very cool. Anybody that's curious to see what Clarksburg is all about, go to Sugar Mill, see what they have. But it's a huge wine region too, compared to I think just to give people an analysis, Clarksburg grows as much as all of the Sierra Foothills. That's crazy to me. Yeah, So the capacity there is amazing, and also because they're nestled inside of this delta that has such a diurnal shift variance from night to day, they can produce some of the cooler grapes. You know what I mean? So there's even Pinot. Sometimes Lodi producers that if they buy Pinot for their tasting rooms, it's actually from Clarksburg. I was looking for an Albarino and then kind of befell into the Chenin Blanc craze. And Chenin Blanc outside of Malbec is going to be that white grape that's going to stick around with Kareen wine.
Yeah.
Because we just kept going with it in various iterations. Viognier is great. We're bringing back Viognier this year. I vinified Viognier again after like a dormancy of a couple of years. I think Viognier is cool for what we do, and I have this love affair with it. Kind of like on the Malbec side, it had this rich history, and then almost I heard like in the 40s almost went out of style in the Rhone, and now it's like one of the most important whites in the Rhone again. Great grape, but Chenin Blanc is kind of where we're gonna keep going with it. And after much consultation with the fam, I think that's gonna be the first thing we're gonna plant as well, even as high up and in the Amador area. Yeah. So that's but to give you an analysis of how we ended up in Clarksburg is because it's the cooler, slightly cooler cousin to Lodi. So and wanting wines a little bit less heavier and of a different kind of production profile, I wanted to go on the cooler side. Didn't want to go as far as Santa Cruz or Sonoma to pick something out, but Clarksburg definitely.
I mean, I'd love to. And I give all of our peers and colleagues so much kudos for going to all of these places far and wide. It's really legit. And again, the kudos is so deserved because it is very logistically difficult.
Yeah.
To gather from very far-flung areas and bring it back to the cellar.
Yeah, you guys have like a relatively kind of tight production area there, right? Like kind of Shenandoah to Clarksburg,
to Lodi,
and Lodi, right in the middle.
Contra Costa would be
they're all
like
they're all kind of hugging each other.
Contra Costa is really just
the most
next,
western,
the next little hop. It's not
exactly
too far from
Lodi
Clarksburg,
and Clarksburg,
it's just each one a little hop from the other.
I think I want to, and we spoke about we're gonna get a little bit more kind of tighter in that, and I want to stay in that area. Yeah, that's what I want to do. I love everything I see coming out of Santa Barbara. Oof, good stuff. I love everything out of Santa Cruz, Napa. I love some of the best Zin actually I've ever had is from Napa, but that's always going to be the tragedy.
Downplay.
It's going to be the tragedy because like some of the best Petit Syrah and Zin I've ever had is from Napa. Sure. But Napa maybe will come to it and figure out that there's a second to Cabernet, and that they're going to bring to the market.
I've talked to growers out there, and they're like, we were thinking about what to plant, like somebody who just moved in, is working with the fruit there and said we wanted to plant a new parcel, a new block, and we wanted to do something else, but the market, just kind of dictates what we do. And I mean, everybody has to be able to make their make up their costs at some point and sell the grapes. I mean,
you have to pay the bills.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, things in Napa. It's tough to get the prices. If it's a new planting, especially, I think.
You look at once in a while as a producer, you have the ability to like source from different areas, and I look at the pricing, right? And I'm like, I'd be growing cab too, I guess. You see like that the graph where and you're like you don't even have to see the number. You go like that's the cab price, isn't it, to the left? so even in the same region,
So your family a couple years ago, I guess, purchased your vineyard. And that's mostly Barbera, Shenandoah Valley.
Yep, absolutely.
What drew you to that area, and was it something like you guys have been thinking about and just trying to find the spot, or?
I mean, I think very early on, we are very much a DIY brand, right? Like everything is just we built this brick by brick. There was no sort of I mean, I love the stories of people saying, hey, I inherited this vineyard from, we've been farming this land for generations. And it was just, we knew when we started the brand that it's sort of like that three-legged stool, right? It's do you either have a storefront, which is so important, important. Like the brick and mortar, like retail operation, tasting and hospitality. There's the third element, which is of course production, right? Like, do we maybe just start out renting a warehouse space so we have our own production space and facility, or is it, land? And we all collectively decided that land is, we really, no pun intended, or no, just to not sound so cliche, but planting our roots to, time. Winemaking is such a lengthy process, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's so tied to land and growth cycles and harvests, and you just cannot experiment that quickly, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we knew that land was was our goal. That was our number one priority. So a few years back, we put together some funds, some savings to buy a piece of land, and we were initially actually thinking something that we would just be planting. We were looking everywhere. We were looking in Lodi, which we love, and we were looking in Clarksburg. We were looking in Paso.
Paso was a big consideration.
Was a big consideration for us, and the Sierras as well. So.
Yeah.
At first, but ultimately our goal was, is it somewhere where we can get to within a day and come back to the Bay Area?
Sure.
And that was, that kind of like really closed the radius in for us.
Yeah.
And we were looking for a long time, and we put in offers across those various
areas.
those various AVAs, and we just got, and Greekor can probably talk a little bit more about the Sierra specifically and our experience there, but we had family, we had friends, we had community, we have vendor relationship and contacts, so that was feeling very natural. And we just honestly, with the property that we ended up in, got very lucky. It was just it hit so many boxes, and it was just right timing. We were talking to a friend who makes wine in the Sierras, and he said, Matt, and this was in the middle of our search, because we had put in offers, we got outbid, and this was during the height of the pandemic when everybody was moving to the country. So it was like bidding wars that you experience in the city here,
happening in the land,
that was happening in the countryside, and we were in the middle of that, and so everything just always felt like it was just not quite working out. And a friend of ours who makes wine up in Fiddletown, he said, wow, you guys are so, like, I give you so much kudos, because I bought the first, property that I laid my eyes on and went for it. But that was 10 years ago.
Yeah. So, 10 years, before 14 years ago now.
Yeah, 14 years ago. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
The things that started so for the longest time in the Sierra foothills, so couple of ways to understand, like, this is a little crash course in Sierra foothills. When people say Sierra foothills, is just as annoying as when people say Central Coast or North Coast, right? These are just these big globs that the marketers and the sales arms put together, where in reality, how different is Napa from Sonoma? It's very vastly different. How different are the AVAs inside of Sonoma from each other? Same thing with the Sierra foothills. Sierra foothills, yes, going to Florida, going to Florida, I'm gonna use the term Sierra foothills for sure. But just to give people understanding, its elevational differences jump like drastically from El Dorado to Murphy's over there in Calaveras, and soil profiles couldn't be any different from one canyon to the other. And Amador being kind of the warmer area, Amador counties, these are counties that I'm listing to those that don't know. And El Dorado for the longest time was where we, I was like, if it's going to be Sierras, we're going to be El Dorado. But then other things started to come into play, where a lot of things in El Dorado,
make it tough
to develop. Yeah, to be very, very, very blunt, but on the lighter side. At some point, when you're buying land, you're trying to see what is that future of your entity going to be, and we intend to be like a full scale everything. We're going to have a vineyard. We already have a vineyard, right? And we're going to expand it. I'm pushing for Chenin Blanc, and I think we're going to do that. Kudos to a couple of people that I really, really, really respect saying that one of their best vintages comes from a Chenin Blanc producer nearby. So I was like, oh, Amador already, Chenin Blanc. Because as a farmer, you're like, what's going to work, right? What you don't want to, it's like Rose said, it's 3 years to even a single crop that is not even that great of a wine, but 3 years just to get to that, right?
Yeah.
5 years till when you be like, because recently I was at a conference when somebody was like literally in that position in San Diego. Kudos to new farmers. And he just like put a wine out there, and everyone's like, "How old's your vineyard?" And like, 3 years old. He's like, that's why. Like, don't be so hard on your wine right now. It's just you're barely there, man. Like in 3 more years, like if in like 3 years your wine is not there, it's like, yeah, maybe something's up with it, but right now don't worry about it. So it's such a lengthy process that you want to be really, really sure what you put in. You know, when people talk, and I listen to podcasts all the time, and they're like, yeah, we did this and then we ripped it out, and I'm like, let's pause. Do you know what that one phrase that he just said? That's 5 years of what he, like, from we did that, then we ripped it out and replanted it, and then saw wine. What he just described in just one little quick gesture of his tongue was a 6-year process. You know what I mean? So be really, really careful and how and what. So I started
It's going to depend on you know, with age comes a little bit of bullishness, or vice versa, right? It just depends on your tolerance for risk,
right? So being in an area, to finish what I'm trying to say, to an area that is kind of like has a little bit of a cohesiveness, no pun intended. I love some of the best things that I've seen are coming out of Calaveras. Some of the best wines I know are coming out of a very obscure vineyard in north side of like Yuba area, Grass Valley. You and I know what we're talking about. But Amador seems to have its shit together the most, in my opinion.
There's some great work being done there.
And seeing, so it has an viticultural past from the 49ers, Jackson and all Sutter Creek. That's where, you know, that's where all the OGs of the late 19th century started. So you got these legacy plantings there. You got a lot of winemakers that are coming up from Sonoma, Bay Area, a lot of natural producers that are seeking out plantings there. You got Ann Kramer, although she's 600 feet above us. We're at around, I want to say 1,300 elevation. She's higher up, but even what she's planting there and proving to the world what our area can do, it just started to make sense. And you know, when I start, and even the last 2 spots that we were about to buy was gonna be El Dorado. We were super close to El Dorado, but then maybe, I don't know, by God's intervention or
divine intervention kind of steered us in a different direction.
We fell on this amazing plot behind a very tiny winery called Rumbauer. But it's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful vineyard that's kind of overlooking the Rumbauer vineyard. And it's and
the treetops.
Yeah, and it's kind of like where, like, even now we have, like, obviously finance issues and this and that, but I kind of want to just stake my claim
constraints.
And be like, this is it. I was like, this is constraint. Yes. I was like, this is where we want to make our kind of mark. This is where we want to produce from. Now finally making our second vintage out of that Barbera that we have 5 acres of. The fruit is phenomenal. We're starting to learn how to be stewards of the land slowly. We're making all those necessary decisions to be aligned with what we said earlier. And yeah, it's tough, but it's rewarding, and that is where we're gonna be. So we have a lot of red, 5 acres right now of one particular interesting grape that I'm starting to really, really, really take to and fall in love with, whether out of necessity or out of
we're learning the
solid grape for Amador,
everything.
But and because we've been gifted the opportunity to really learn the grape now, it's like this is the vintage of Barbera 6 ways, you know, because we're trying to figure out what is the best expression of this fruit that we have in this, you know, and in our vineyard. And
to kind of, in every story, there's a reason for why we say things the way we say it. Last year we had our not only is it a good purchase of that vineyard was 100% under contract. I was able to only get 3 tons for ourselves. And we were happy to sell it to these Napa producers. Well, guess what happened this year? We all know what happened this year. 32 years in a row of 30% dip on decline.
People pulled back their SKUs, their production, their volume.
Yeah, and it went from like we had 3 buyers and 2 big buyers, and then like we're like up until May, I'm like, you got hello, and then when I heard one of them declared bankruptcy, I was like, I'm listening about our client on NPR. so this is what do we do? And that's where we decided, no, we're not gonna leave it on the vines. We're just gonna we're gonna go for it. At a time where like I think the most smarter thing would be to like pull back. We just hit the gas pedal even harder. So.
It seems to be a pattern of going all in.
Yeah.
So this is our biggest vintage.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Hence him asking me if I'm okay at the beginning of this conversation.
But others do it, and they do it. You feel like they do it fairly effortlessly, right? There is no such thing, by the way, in wine. It's all very hard, but we want to we want to continue hitting the mark, continue making the right decisions.
The best vintage we've ever had. I know it's such a cliche, right? You ask a winemaker, like, how does this vintage compare? They're like, this is our best wine yet. Or how does this release compare to others? Or like, it's better than ever. But that's truly the goal.
So we're gonna be we are a Sierra producer, and we're gonna kind of build out there. So the next phase is the construction and the planting and moving forward.
What have you been learning about Barbera? Working with it, lots of different ways.
Yeah, I mean, it's got a beautiful it's got that one note that so it's a Barbera, but it's also a California Barbera. Yeah. I've been drinking a lot of Italian, obviously, Northern Italian, Piedmontese Barberas, some further south as well. Was or still is one of the kind of the powerhouse grapes of Italy, lesser known again, kind of like the Zinfandel of that region. Zin is so varied here and does so much and can be kind of molded in so many ways. I've had Barbera in so many different styles that I'm like, whoa, one thing that rings true, it's that acid just peeks through. And once I saw that, I was like, you know what? There's a lot I can do with that. So, and with that being one of it's acid. And because of California, the way that our sun just, marinates that skin, it's acid and it's flavor. I was like, you know what, we can dial it in. We could figure it out.
It's interesting because Barbera, it's like commonly kind of like this, not dichotomy, but sort of like a grape in duality. It's both heavy but also really juicy.
Very juicy.
At the same time. But on the heavier side, right? And I think it just gives us a little bit more flexibility.
Yeah. And also looking at studying what it is in Italy, right? It was like the not like the second fiddle to Nebbiolo in Piedmont, right? But not second fiddle. It's actually way more planted than Nebbiolo, but it just doesn't get that. It doesn't have it's Barolo Barbaresco is everybody's king and queen, right? But Barbera is actually what's kind of keeping that region going, So it's it's that working grape wine, and it's actually part and parcel of what I'm seeing happening, where California winemakers are taking a lot of the blending grapes, Malbec being ours, Viognier is another one that keeps going into other blends, right? Now I'm learning that even our clients, I was like. So once they bought that Barbera, I was like, hey, where's that Barbera? Where's the Barbera? And someone brings out a bottle to me, and I'm like, this says a Sonoma blend. The producer was in Sonoma. I think people can understand who this entity that went under is. So these people are in Sonoma, right? And I'm like, oh, this is not a standalone Sierra Foothills Barbera, because I wanted to know like what they produce out of our event.
Sure.
No. Apparently, like they needed that acid boost, and this Barbera
Okay.
gave it to them, right? And it's beautiful to see that grape just kind of do its own. There are a couple of good producers in the Sierras that Amador is the 90% of California and actually American Barbera growth, just in general. Outside of Italy, it's the second place. And it's I saw that there's a couple of great expressions of it outside of what I've been trying that's Italian, and there are good producers. And again, Ann Kramer planted Barbera as well, and now there's good production from that. So Barbera, not to our friend Adam of Perch Wines, produces great Barbera from a different planting and also in Amador. There is looks like a little bit of a reemergence, a little bit of a crowd swell. For a minute, I thought that Amador was starting to like walk away from Barbera, but it looks like this new iteration of winemakers is going to kind of pull it back and keep it, because if it's good, why go away? We don't need to do the Cabernet of Napa. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We don't need to go in that direction. Barbera, I'm starting to fall in love with this fruit. And it's not because I have 5 acres of it. You know what I mean? Because we've been, another conversation was, do we chop it and regraft it? You know what I mean? Because that's also a fast way of changing up a vineyard. But I don't want to, because this is a 14-year-old vineyard and it's beautiful and it's doing a lot.
You're thinking of putting some Chenin in.
That'll be the white.
That would be new plantings.
Yes, absolutely.
Not taking any of the Barbera out.
No.
Anything. Just, we got some room.
Yeah, we sit on 40 acres. Yeah, we sit on 40 acres.
Okay.
So
there's some
a lot of room.
There's some room. And I mean, the land is, there's, topographically varied, right? Like there's different areas that would not yield well, that would not lend well to a new block, but we have some really nice gentle slopes that we're planning for the Chenin Blanc.
Nice.
Yeah,
That area, I mean, that just since you brought it up, but like Shake Ridge, that's one of the most striking things with it is there's different expositions everywhere. It's so varied.
Absolutely, yeah. And where the Chenin Blanc will most likely, and again, I can see Rose like looking like, wow, we're like a 99%. Yes, I think Chenin will be. The reason is Chenin needs to go in, a white needs to go in. Amador is like starved for white grapes. Like that area really, and
they pulled out their Sauvignon Blanc.
A lot of Sauvignon Blanc, but again, because no offense to a lot of farmers are coming in and they're going like, what's popular, what's going around,
what's gonna sell?
Yeah, and they're like, and what's the most popular grape in Napa outside of Cab? Sauvignon Blanc. You know what I mean? Sauvignon Blanc and Chardonnay, right? There is Chardonnay in El Dorado, and I'm sure there's some plantings in Amador, but Amador is a little too warm for Chardonnay. But Sauvignon Blanc was the second, and even that planting of Sauvignon Blanc, that's like 8% of all of Amador. It's maybe less. It's a white grape, not even Sauvignon Blanc.
Oh, okay.
So white grapes are really, really needed there, and I don't think that it's a climatic issue. You know what I mean? Like I don't think there is a white grape that'll do very well in that area, and I want to be the farmer that does that. Nice. Because I want to produce good white wine from the Sierra foothills as well, and that's kind of So here we go. That is the idea. So we're thinking of starting in January, February, when we kind of start sourcing the seedlings and the cuttings. We're gonna maybe go in on a 1 to 2 acre planting.
Okay. Yeah.
And then just kind of see where that goes in. The reason why I'm kind of going like, let's do we got to do this, even though like right now is the most expensive year ever, because we're vinifying the most wine we've ever done.
Sure. Yeah.
That's bottles, that's corks, that's labels, that's a lot of expense, storage, and on and on. But I know that whole, like from today's planting, the first time I'll know if it's any good is going to be in 3 years. So the sooner we start, the sooner we'll know how hot that sun will be heating down on planet Earth.
I mean, I heard this from a lot of growers and a lot of winemakers. It was a breakneck pace this harvest, right? And I think it had a lot to do with the inconsistencies in weather. or maybe a little bit too much on the heat spike that at least we experienced at our vineyard, right? Like, what's a 3-4 brick jump that, and I'm new to this as a grower. Like I'm thinking, okay, 2 bricks a week, like that makes sense, right? But it's just like you go a few days apart and you're like, how is my field sample so much different from like 4 or 5 days ago? And August was very intense.
Everything came in at the same time because we're still contracted with other, right? So we're not just making only the Barbera. We're just, this year we are came back to our Viognier project again, and other vineyards out of Lodi, and everything just came at the same time. We're like, can we parcel it out? No, it's all the measurements are reading now, and if it's gonna be a week from now, it's just gonna be too sugary, and the bricks are gonna just jump too high. So it was it's and this wasn't even the case in 2017. Going back to that the times in Napa, there was that notion like you ended the fermentation finished out in darn near December. Like we're talking about like the initial, not malolactic. Or like late November was still
off.
Like and the crews get smaller and smaller.
November,
you
like
shave
there's
down.
There's still activity in November.
Now, like you're like, whoa,
everybody's
like, we're done. Like October, we're done. What?
Yeah.
Like that's a very like when you take a pause, you're like, wow, that's how crazy the Earth has shifted.
Yeah,
like that's
a deep impact.
You believe into this, you don't, whatever it is. Like look at the samples from harvest dates from back in the day. This is not the case, So whatever it may be, we're in it. We're in it 1,000%. And we're gonna keep planting at a time when everybody's trying not to plant.
At a time when
they're
pulling hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of acres this year.
Yeah, I mean, last time I was in Lodi, which wasn't that long ago. I mean, saw it's a lot of fruit
clusters hanging
on some of the vineyards.
Yeah.
There's a vineyard manager said on a recent podcast. He said, "You do not plant grapes as a grower unless you have a signed, sealed, delivered customer for those grapes, or you're going to be using them yourself."
Yeah. That's why our choice this year was like, well, when that one customer fell through, I was like, it was important for us to make sure that we vinify everything.
Yeah.
And that's where we went in 120%.
This is a random question,
yes.
And I don't know what the FPS availability or anything like that, but have you ever thought of any Armenian grapes or anything?
Well, we
a while back, really long time ago, feels like a century ago now, but like when we first launched commercially, we actually wanted to do a project in Armenia.
Okay.
We wanted to do a project and then import under our so vinify, and we were starting to work with talk to some growers, work with some spaces out there to start the project, but lots of really difficult geopolitical sort of tragedies sort of befell during COVID. There was the war, the Artsakh war that started in 2020 in September, and so just a lot of things that really kind of upended that process or that idea for now. But yeah, no.
So here's the funny thing: we're constantly oscillating. Do we divulge or we do not? We're in UC Davis right now. We've imported Areni grapes, and this podcast will be the first kind of propagation of that. The reason why we're a little bit yay or nay is Armenians, as they are trying to like come into the world, have a duality in that idea. They're like, well, we think Areni should only be in Vaiozor region, not even just that one little region of Armenia. Okay. And they're like, you're right, no, but we as a family that studies the way that French, Italian, now what is Barbera? Is it a native to Amador? No, it's not. It's an Italian grape, right? And we are Armenians from Georgia. There's Rakatsiteli Plantix right now, the grape from Georgia, in the Finger Lakes of New York. The way that an Armenian viticultural story will expand throughout the world is going to be to see how these grapes will do in other areas. And yes, absolutely, part and parcel of some of that acreage in Shenandoah will have Areni grapes probably soon.
That's a big project
of ours. However, it's bringing it in, it's propagating it, it's seeing how it grows, it's vinifying it, and then it's pushing it to the market where you're going to have a consumer going, "This is Armenian wine." It's Armenian grape. It's California wine, and seeing how that both the adoption from a lot of our compatriots and probably a lot of criticism. We already have. I know a lot of winemakers that are like, no, that has to be a grape only there. That's cool and all, yes, but I understand and I really like the grape and the production of that grape from there. But a lot of also producers there, just like a lot of the French. You notice how French are happy. It's Cabernet is everywhere. Pinot is everywhere. It only reinforces who they are. It only reinforces what they do. Yes, there's competition, but still, like that's phenomenal. I don't think Burgundy hates Oregon. You know what I mean?
There's some that have started projects.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
Santa Barbara.
Or Santa or New Zealand, whatever, wherever it is, or Patagonia too. Now and plus I also want to know how the Malbec that we deal with from California is different than the Malbec from Cahors and also the Malbec from Argentina. Yeah. And Argentina has Malbec variations from where it's at Uco Valley, high altitude. What is it? I think now that grapes are all over the world and they've kind of come to this, we want to know what Areni is going to be. And as a matter of fact, Areni is the first grape. Again, I'm going to be pushing a lot of the white grape plantings. Voskehat is a phenomenal Armenian white grape. I want to see it in Amador as well. So that one's still TBD, right? But right now we're dealing with UC Davis because they are
we're working with UC Davis.
We're working with UC Davis and we're bringing in the Areni grape. You're welcome to other people that are interested in purchasing that. We're taking on that expense, and hopefully later on people can have cuttings and we can kind of see where it goes from there. So Areni will be part of that. But that being said, Areni even from Armenia is not that well known yet. You know what I mean? But we know it's a great grape. Kind of lands itself on the Syrah spectrum, and also Amador is very phenomenal Syrah production. Bill Easton with his 100 pointers year after year. It's cool and all, right? But I think in that area we can definitely see where Areni can go. So we're very excited about that. First vintage, maybe 2029? You'll have something in the bottle. No, maybe 2030, maybe. So this is how winemakers speak. We speak in years to decades.
Rose, you've still been doing some traveling and harvests. I met your brother a few months before I met you because you were traveling.
I was away.
Yeah.
Well, I think Grigor had, as he described his training, his learning by doing, I was more in the background. Of course, very involved as you probably can imagine in the big decisions and, participating in our sort of what's our name? How do we figure out our go-to-market strategy? All of these considerations was mostly on the sales and marketing biz dev side of things. I was working throughout the past decade in tech, people and culture management, talent development, consulting, and that was my I loved that work. I had to be very focused in it. So it was my 9 to 5. This was my 5 to 9 weekends, right? And at a certain point, especially when we bought the vineyard, and spending time, walking rows and, field sampling and, working alongside our team with, throughout the growing season and wanting to be out there as much as I could. I knew that I need to gain my own training. Of course, every harvest I'm involved in our production. I'm there to assist, in the cellar, but I was very limited to how much I could participate because of my, the constraints of schedule. And so I decided to take a sabbatical from my job. And I knew, I need to be here during the northern harvest. And so I decided to seek out a harvest internship in the South. Yeah. So I went to Chile. I was in the San Antonio Valley, Leda Valley, this past spring or their fall, our spring, their fall, for the 2024 vintage. And I I worked for a small grower or a small family producer in Chile. A small producer is basically we made like 25,000. They make 25,000 cases of VGS.
I know, right?
Very tiny.
Yeah, I learned because
family-owned organic vineyards.
I was very excited. I don't know much about Chile. Actually, first wine that turned me into wine lover was a Chilean Carmenere. But I know nothing about Chile, and she's like, yeah, small producer. I'm like, awesome, yeah. It was a, and she goes, I'm like, wait, what? Like, what? How many tons you gonna crush? Like 300 tons? What? I was like, I don't know. What are their large producers like?
Yeah. No, and it was funny because we had a wonderful team. We were from all over. There was one French Belgian gal. There was one French guy from south of France, and then there was a guy who was a UC Davis grad from Sonoma, and it was me. And so we worked alongside the cellar master and the assistant cellar master is a cellar hand together. So it was, and our winemaker, of course. So it was just our small but mighty team on those cases. on that tonnage. And it was a really long harvest. Actually, I was surprised. It was I would say we went the full length of time. I would say 10 weeks. Across that was from the first Pinot pick to the last pressing of the Syrah. So they specialize in Pinot, Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay. Cool climate Syrah was just a gem. Yeah.
And that's actually something that I'm noticing as well here. It's when I said our stuff comes in so fast, it's the inland stuff that's really, really hectic. Like Sonoma, Santa Barbara, coastal. I still know people are still crushing and fermenting right now, and I'm oh wow, I feel like my harvest is done and goodbye. And that's cool. But then I realized that's how it should be. And yes, climatically, where Rose was, it's a much more coastal.
Yeah. We were able. Our favorite block, Syrah block, was a little bit elevated, and we could see the Pacific. Wow. Yeah. Very nice. So very interesting experience because it was a little bit very tight-knit, wonderful group, but we weren't really we were in such a small wine region, that there weren't a whole lot of other wineries nearby. Just a handful in that area. So we're an hour and a half west of Santiago.
Okay.
Yeah. Which seems like not much, but it wasn't a concentrated amount of. Sure. And it was great. I think that the timing is right, and Rose is going to do it again this year to a different region.
Okay. TBD.
TBD. Yeah. And it's phenomenal to have that. We're kind of coming into this partnership that's not just on the side of wine sales. Now this vintage, it's Rose and I we're speaking the winemaker speak, and I don't have to explain, and something she can even tell me because that's a larger production that I've ever been to, well save for that small producer in Modesto Central Valley area, and our winemaking team is definitely kind of coming into what it will be.
I mean, I think it's just we're building our know-how now. And I think, my training is a little bit different, and I think that makes us even stronger, right? Like, I'm seeking out that sort of, hands-on experience in a totally different way than we were doing earlier. And I'm doing my dub set too. So I'm slowly working my way.
That's right. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah.
Because the idea as a winemaker is always to like retrain your palate, to not have that cellar palate, you know what I mean? To not have that same exact same. So yeah, it's a blessing that Rose was able to do it. It was a financial hit, but because going into wine is, like, I tell a lot of people,
from tech.
Is very different from tech. Quite the different. Yeah. And we're hopeful for the future, although the future is very, very like we don't know what, like, everything.
It's precarious, right? And sometimes you look at it and you think, wow, we still want to build in spite of that, or in the face of that. And that's our story. The tenacity, the resistance, to disappear, to kind of fall into the fold, to, that's sort of that's very lockstep with who we are as people, and, our survival as, as Armenians, as immigrants, as, as winemakers who just did not inherit, acreage, and, generational wealth. Like, it's just something that we are laying brick by brick. It's one at a time. And we do it despite the, what's sort of happening around us. But I also think that it's a good time to be, you never come into an industry when things are just hot and amazing and very, very expensive. And
I mean, 2020 was very chaotic, but like everyone and their mama wanted to buy wine. So that was like, I was like, whoa, everybody's just buying. It's going to be so easy. Well, it started off to like, so the funny thing about 2020 was January, we had ideas. We had a big like strategy of tastings and what we're gonna do. March, everybody knows what happened. And in early to mid-March, we're like, is this gonna be it for us? Like, is this, because we don't know what's gonna happen. And then like things just kind of went haywire in terms of people wanting to buy. But then that was coupled with the most like apocalyptic harvest where the orange October,
we just got very lucky because we were working with Lodi fruit at that point.
And it wasn't hit as hard as everything else. The year after is when my first vintage was in the Sierra foothills, and that's where the Calder fire was. I was looking at fermenters as the clouds of smoke were pouring past. It was different. And then we the year prior to buying the vineyard, we experienced what in the Sierras is fairly common, the March frost hit. And like, so the vineyard that we had, we currently own, the year prior to that, produced only a fraction of what it is capable of. So like, I was like, all of this was like, I feel like we're going through like this very, very fast education process, which is very positive, but very hectic at the same time.
It's a lot of learning.
It's a lot of learning. And I think it's going to be a learning forever. That's the beauty of it. I see a lot of old winemakers and and they're like, you can see like, they're like, oh yeah, I figured this out, but this I could still do a